downtown Jackson for justice of the murder of Tyeasha Starks. Today marks 2 months since Tyeasha's murder, and 2 days since Tennessee legislation moved forward to protect gun firms.
On the evening of February 20th, 2023, 22-year-old Tyeasha Kataria Starks arrived at a residence on Harpeth Drive for a routine custody exchange with her infant son. Minutes later, gunfire erupted. When deputies arrived around 6:30 p.m., they found Starks dead. The resident, whose identity remains undisclosed, was not charged. According to the official account, she was holding a stun device at the time, but witness statements conflict and critical forensic details have not been released. No surveillance footage has been made public. Her infant child's whereabouts immediately afterward remain unclear. Only one narrative has been accepted publicly, leaving significant gaps about what truly happened inside that home. The case continues to raise questions about self-defense claims, custody arrangements, and investigative transparency. The full story of that night remains hidden, with missing evidence and unanswered questions that have yet to be resolved.
Parents and family tells 39 News that Tyeasha Starks was going to pick up her child from his father in February. While getting her son, an argument broke out between Tyeasha and the boy's grandfather. The family claims soon after, the grandfather shot at young Tyeasha a total of 5 times. So far, no one has been charged with Tyeasha's death. Family friend and activist Karen Spencer McGee is frustrated.
Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Tyeasha Kataria Starks was 22 years old at the time of her death. She grew up in a large, structured family that included her parents, siblings, and extended relatives. Her upbringing emphasized discipline, education, and personal responsibility. Those who knew her described her as dependable, mature, and focused, often stepping into leadership roles within her family and social circles. She completed her early education in Brownsville, Tennessee, and graduated from Haywood High School in 2018. During high school, she participated in extracurricular activities, including cheerleading and student organizations. Her academic performance was solid, and she was known to take her studies seriously. After high school, she enrolled at Austin Peay State University in Clarksville, majoring in biology. Her long-term academic goal was to work in the medical or dental field. Friends noted that she was close to completing her degree and devoted significant time to coursework, exams, and labs. Her responsibilities required a consistent routine of studying, commuting, and balancing school with personal life. Beyond her studies, she had several interests. She enjoyed singing, dancing, and socializing with friends. She had an interest in the beauty industry and engaged in modeling for a small group. Her passion for beauty eventually led her into entrepreneurship. She ran a small lash extension business from home. As a lash technician, she developed a client list based on word-of-mouth promotion and consistent service. She maintained a strict schedule to fulfill client appointments around her classes and parenting duties. Her work ethic in this business suggested she planned to expand later in life or use it as a secondary income source. Motherhood became one of her major responsibilities. She gave birth to her son, whom she raised while balancing the demands of school and business. Managing childcare, exams, and client appointments required long hours and significant organization. Her friends and relatives said her goals centered heavily on building a stable future for her son. Completing her degree and securing a career with long-term security were among her plans. In the months and weeks leading up to February 20th, 2023, Tyeasha's life was defined by travel, school responsibilities, and managing custody arrangements for her son. The child's father and his family lived in Jackson, Tennessee. Because she was attending university in Clarksville, custody exchanges required regular 2-hour drives each way. The custody situation involved both families communicating to arrange pickup times and agree on schedules. It appears that arrangements were often informal, depending on the needs of both households. At times, the arrangements required last-minute changes, causing stress for Tyeasha as she balanced school deadlines with sudden schedule updates. Some friends stated that there had been tension between the two families, especially regarding communication and disagreements about when and how long the child would stay at either home. However, there are no confirmed reports of major conflict before the night of the incident. What is clear is that the responsibility of long-distance parenting, university studies, and business obligations created a demanding environment for her. In the days leading up to the incident, friends noticed that she appeared stressed, mostly due to school workload and parenting duties. She kept her routine consistent and continued to communicate with both families about upcoming custody dates. On February 20th, 2023, Tyeasha followed her usual routine. She attended or prepared for classes, worked on assignments, and maintained communication with friends and family. At some point that day, she was informed that the paternal side of the family could no longer keep her son for the originally planned amount of time. This required her to change her schedule and drive to Jackson to pick him up earlier than expected. Before leaving Clarksville, she spoke with a friend who later accompanied her on the trip. The friend stated that she gave Tyeasha a stun gun for protection because she feared potential confrontation during the pickup. During the drive, the atmosphere inside the car was described as normal. There was no indication that she expected extreme conflict. She traveled directly to the residence on Harpeth Drive, where the paternal grandparents lived and where her son was staying at the time. The residence on Harpeth Drive was located in a quiet area of North Madison County. The home had a front porch, a driveway leading to yard, and was surrounded by neighboring houses at a modest distance. When she arrived, she stepped out of the vehicle and approached the front door. Her friend remained inside the car, observing the exchange. Upon knocking on the door and calling for her son, a verbal exchange began between her and members of the household. Accounts described the conversation as tense, with both sides raising their voices. The discussion centered around the pickup of the child and the earlier scheduling changes. As tensions rose, someone inside the home closed the door. The friend in the car recalled telling one of the adults at the home to stop yelling, while the verbal exchange continued between the two families. Moments after the door was closed, the paternal grandfather reportedly exited the home armed. Within seconds, gunfire erupted. Witnesses would later describe the gunshots as sudden, rapid, and occurring without any extended argument outside. Reports indicate that Tyeasha had the stun device in her hand during the confrontation, but accounts conflict on whether it was activated or simply held. What is clear is that the situation escalated immediately from verbal disagreement to lethal force. After being struck by gunfire, Tyeasha attempted to flee the scene. She returned to the vehicle with her friend and child inside. In a state of panic and injury, she attempted to drive away from the residence. During the attempted escape, the vehicle collided with a curb or roadside obstruction, causing it to veer off the road. The impact disabled the vehicle in a nearby yard or driveway. Emergency services received calls around 6:30 p.m. Deputies arrived and found the vehicle, the injured passengers, and Tyeasha unresponsive. She was pronounced dead on the scene from gunshot wounds. Authorities opened an investigation, identifying the incident as a custody dispute that escalated into a fatal shooting. Officials documented that she had been in possession of a stun device, which they reported had been activated. The child was taken into protective evaluation due to the circumstances. The events inside the residence began with conflicting accounts from those present. Each person described a different catalyst for the confrontation, leaving investigators with multiple versions of what occurred in the minutes leading to the gunshot. Some said the argument started over a disagreement that had carried over from earlier in the day. Others stated that tension had been building for days, and the confrontation was the result of an ongoing dispute rather than a sudden outburst. Because the statements varied, establishing an objective timeline became the central challenge for deputies. A stun device became a significant point of focus. Witnesses confirmed that Tyeasha Starks had a device with her, and the object was later retrieved from the floor of the bedroom. The device was described as compact, handheld, and capable of producing an electrical charge when activated. According to witness statements, she carried it for personal protection and routinely kept it with her. Investigators documented that the device had been discharged at least once during the incident, though there was no consensus on the exact moment it was activated. Some individuals claimed it occurred during the verbal argument. Others said it happened when physical distance closed between the two individuals. The sequence of escalation inside the room was pieced together through interviews. The confrontation began with verbal exchanges. Voices were raised, and movements inside the room became rapid. Those nearby stated that both individuals were standing at the time the argument intensified. Witnesses reported seeing Tyeasha and the shooter reposition themselves around the room, though no accounts matched exactly. One said she moved toward the door. Another stated she stepped forward while the shooter stepped back. A third suggested that both were in close proximity and circling each other. Positioning became a central point in the shooter's claim of fear. He reported that Tyeasha's movements, combined with the presence of a stun device, caused him to believe he was in immediate danger. According to his statement, he raised a firearm in response to that perceived threat. He maintained that the discharge was a defensive action rather than an intentional act to cause harm. Investigators documented his statement, but also noted the inconsistencies between his description and the statements from the others present. Only one gunshot was fired. The direction of the shot was described as frontal. The distance appeared to be close range, though investigators later relied on trajectory assessments and physical evidence rather than witness recollection. The reaction of witnesses was immediate. Several individuals reported hearing the gunshot and rushing toward the room. One stated he heard a scream followed by silence. Another recalled seeing Tyeasha collapse within seconds. In the moments following a gunshot, individuals inside the home reacted quickly, but without coordination. Some ran toward the room, while others moved away in shock. Two individuals attempted to assist Tyeasha immediately after locating her on the floor. Another person was heard asking for someone to call emergency services. Interviews later confirmed that the 911 call was placed by one of the witnesses, though the caller's identity was not publicly released. The dispatch log reflected a brief account. Female shot, unconscious. Assistance requested immediately. At the scene, Tyeasha was found unresponsive with no verbal response and limited movement. Attempts by friends to move her were documented by investigators, though deputies later informed them that moving her body complicated the initial evaluation. The goal, according to witnesses, had been to get her outside to wait for emergency responders. Officers arrived within minutes of the call. Their first action was securing the residence. All individuals were instructed to move into one area, while deputies began assessing the scene. The shooter remained on site and was separated from the others for questioning. Deputies documented the location of all individuals present, though these details were not made public. Initial investigative steps included photographing the scene, checking for additional hazards, and identifying the location of the firearm. The gun was recovered on a nearby surface within the room. The stun device was also collected. After ensuring no ongoing threat, deputies initiated standard procedures for physical evidence collection. This included marking the location of the shell casing, identifying the blood patterns, and documenting the trajectory indicators visible on the nearby wall. Emergency medical personnel removed Tyeasha's body from the residence after she was pronounced dead at the scene. The infant in the home at the time was found unharmed in another room. According to witness statements, the child had been asleep during the incident and was not present in the area where the confrontation took place. In the days immediately following the shooting, the sheriff's department released limited public statements. Their early classification of the incident as a possible self-defense shooting caused confusion and frustration for the family. The department stated that the shooter's claim of fear and the presence of a stun device required investigators to explore the possibility of justification before determining charges. No immediate arrest was made. Authorities cited the need to examine all physical evidence, conduct multiple interviews, and submit findings to the district attorney's office. This delay became one of the most contested aspects of the case. Investigators collected several key pieces of evidence. The stun device was logged and sent for analysis to confirm discharge. The firearm was processed for fingerprints and mechanical condition. Trajectory analysis was conducted to determine the angle and direction of the single shot. Witness statements were compiled into a structured timeline, though inconsistencies prolonged the process. The autopsy report, according to what authorities disclosed, confirmed a single gunshot wound. Details regarding range and internal damage were not publicly released in full, contributing to further concern from family. The Sheriff's Department stated that full findings had been forwarded to the District Attorney's Office for review, but did not provide a time frame for the final determination. Throughout the investigation, the family voiced concerns about transparency. They reported receiving minimal updates and stated they were unaware of key developments unless they contacted officials themselves. The case remained open for an extended period as the district attorney evaluated whether the shooter's self-defense claim met the legal threshold. The length of time the case remained under review became a central point of community frustration, as no definitive outcome was announced for months. When news of Tyeasha Starks' death was confirmed, her family released a series of statements expressing their immediate concerns about how the information was presented and the speed at which authorities formed conclusions. According to the family, the initial narrative offered by law enforcement did not align with what they knew about Tyeasha's character, relationships, or behavior leading up to the incident. They questioned the accuracy and completeness of the details released to the public, raising early doubts about whether all relevant evidence had been adequately collected. Her parents stated that they were notified of the shooting but received limited information about the sequence of events. They publicly noted inconsistencies, including the timeline, the reported struggle, and the justification used by the shooter. They emphasized that Tyeasha did not have a history of violent actions, and that the explanation provided did not fully account for her presence at the location, the alleged altercation, or the speed at which the claim of self-defense was accepted. Discrepancies soon surfaced between the family's understanding and the law enforcement narrative. Their account suggested that Tyeasha was attempting to retrieve her child during a custody-related disagreement, while the official version centered on the shooter's claim that he acted only in response to a threat. These conflicting interpretations generated questions about who initiated physical contact, how force escalated, and what factors influenced the shooter's decision to fire. The family also voiced concern for the safety and well-being of the child at the center of the conflict. They highlighted unresolved disputes regarding custody and previous tensions between Tyeasha and the father of her child. According to the family, these tensions may have contributed to the environment in which the incident occurred. Their position suggested that the events leading to her death were not solely isolated actions, but part of a longer pattern of disagreements and emotional strain. The emotional toll on family members was evident in their public appearances, where they described the difficulty of processing both the loss and the explanations provided. They stated that the lack of clear answers further complicated their ability to understand what occurred. They maintained that Tyeasha was attempting to regain control of her role as a mother, and that any narrative portraying her as an aggressor contradicted their direct experiences with her. From the beginning, the family expressed a belief regarding the shooter's motive. They stated that the conflict stemmed from prior disputes rather than an immediate threat warranting lethal force. Their concerns pointed toward the possibility of an avoidable escalation, suggesting that the shooting may have resulted from frustration, anger, or an attempt to assert control rather than genuine fear of harm. Because of these unresolved questions, the family repeatedly called for accountability. Their statements requested a deeper investigation, additional interviews, and a more thorough review of evidence, including physical injuries, phone records, and past communications between the parties. They emphasized that accountability did not necessarily imply a predetermined conclusion, but required a process that fully examined all available facts rather than relying solely on the shooter's account. Following public reports of the shooting, the community organized a candlelight vigil in Tyeasha's honor. The turnout included friends, relatives, neighbors, and supporters who had followed the case online. Attendees gathered to highlight concerns about the circumstances of her death and to express support for the family's ongoing push for answers. Organizers used the event to call attention to perceived inconsistencies and urge for further examination of the self-defense claim being used to justify the shooting. Several supporters carried signs displaying phrases such as "We need answers," "Justice requires evidence," and "No more silence." Quotes shared at the vigil emphasized the community's desire for transparency in the investigation and fair treatment for victims in similar circumstances. The gathering marked one of the first moments in which the case gained broader local attention, moving from isolated discussions among acquaintances to a visible public matter. On social media, the story quickly generated hashtags and posts from users questioning the narrative. Photos of Tyeasha, Statements from family members and commentary from community advocates circulated widely. Platforms such as Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram hosted discussions analyzing the timeline, the shooter's explanation, and the legal standards surrounding use of force. These conversations often highlighted the same concerns raised by the family: inconsistencies, custody-related tension, and uncertainty about whether lethal force was necessary. Local podcasters took interest in the case, creating episodes breaking down police reports, known facts, and public reactions. These independent discussions help sustain attention and encourage viewers to explore how Tennessee law handles self-defense claims. Grassroots coverage allowed the case to reach audiences who may not have seen traditional news outlets reporting on the incident. Through these efforts, the community positioned the case not only as an isolated tragedy, but as part of a broader discussion about interpersonal conflict, custody disputes, and the boundaries of justified force. The public response continued to amplify the family's request for accountability and contributed to ongoing pressure for a closer legal review. The shooter's claim relied on Tennessee's self-defense laws, which permit individuals to use force, including deadly force, if they reasonably believe it is necessary to prevent imminent death or serious bodily injury. The law requires that the belief be both genuine and objectively reasonable based on circumstances at the time. Tennessee also follows the Castle Doctrine, which allows individuals to use deadly force without a duty to retreat when attacked in their own home or dwelling. However, the application of this doctrine depends on whether the shooter was lawfully present, whether the perceived threat was unavoidable, and whether the victim unlawfully entered or attempted to enter the residence with force. Legal analysts examining the case question whether the doctrine applied fully, partially, or not at all, depending on where the altercation took place, and whether the victim had any legal right or reason to be there. Another core question involved whether a stun device, if present and activated, could legally qualify as a deadly threat. Tennessee law categorizes threats based on potential to cause serious bodily harm. While stun devices can capacitate, their classification as deadly weapons varies contextually, often depending on proximity, intensity of confrontation, and specific behavior during the struggle. The principle of proportionality is central to Tennessee's use of force laws. Legal experts reviewing the case emphasize that deadly force must match the level of threat. The analysis therefore examined whether the shooter's response exceeded what the law considered proportional in relation to the threat he described. Determining proportionality required reviewing eyewitness statements, physical evidence, and any recordings of the events leading up to the shooting. Past Tennessee cases involving similar circumstances, domestic disputes, custody conflicts, and physical altercations involving non-firearm devices offer comparisons but no exact parallels. Some cases upheld self-defense claims when threats were immediate and unavoidable. Others rejected them where evidence indicated excessive or unnecessary force. Ultimately, the central legal question was whether the shooter's account fit within Tennessee's justification framework. This determination relied on analyzing intention, immediacy of threat, available alternatives, and factual consistency. The case remained under scrutiny as family members and community advocates pushed for a comprehensive review of all evidence before any final legal conclusion. The case surrounding the death of Tyeasha Starks remains defined by fragmented information, limited official disclosure, and a sequence of events shaped more by what is missing than by what is confirmed. The circumstances of the shooting, the actions leading up to it, and the decisions made afterward form a chain of unanswered questions that continue to raise concern for her family and the broader community. Despite early reports providing a general description of the incident, many key elements remain opaque, creating an environment where only one version of events has been publicly accepted while other possibilities remain unaddressed. One of the most significant gaps is the ongoing decision to withhold the identity of the shooter. Law enforcement described the individual as cooperating, but did not release any identifying details, including name, age, or connection to the child involved. Without that disclosure, independent assessment of statements, background, or prior disputes is not possible. The absence of this information also prevents outside scrutiny of the shooter's credibility or potential biases. Another major uncertainty involves surveillance footage. The home where the fatal exchange occurred reportedly had outdoor visibility from multiple angles, common in many neighborhoods due to doorbell cameras and home security systems. However, no law enforcement statement ever confirmed the existence or non-existence of such footage. If it existed, it was not released. If it did not exist, no explanation was provided as to whether nearby homes or public-facing cameras were checked. The silence leaves a gap in understanding whether visual evidence could have clarified the sequence of events. The case also includes discrepancies between accounts from those present. Witnesses provided differing descriptions of Tyeasha's position before the shooting, whether she advanced, retreated, or stood still, and what verbal exchanges took place. Conflicting statements create uncertainty regarding intent, threat level, and the proportionality of the response. With only one narrative formally adopted, these inconsistencies remain unresolved, leaving significant questions about the accuracy of the final conclusions. Despite multiple witnesses and multiple accounts, only one version was used to frame the incident, the shooter's self-defense claim. Other statements were not publicly acknowledged in detail. It is unclear how investigators weighed contradictory accounts, what methodology they used to determine credibility, or whether any statements were excluded or minimized. The lack of transparency contributes to ongoing doubts about whether the investigation accounted for all available information. A stun device recovered at the scene has been repeatedly cited in reports, but the precise condition of that device remains unclarified. The central question is whether it was used toward a person, discharged into the air, or simply activated without contact. Each scenario carries different implications. Physical examination of the device could reveal burn marks, recent discharge, or fingerprints indicating how it was handled. No detailed forensic findings were released, leaving its role in the confrontation unresolved. Another major point of confusion concerns why Tyeasha was inside the residence rather than supported through a neutral, curbside exchange as she reportedly expected. Some custody arrangements specify outdoor exchanges to avoid conflict. Entering the home changed dynamics, increased proximity, and placed her in an environment controlled by the other party. It remains unclear whether she was invited inside, walked involuntarily, or was pulled into the residence by the sequence of events. No official explanation addresses the distinction between the expected arrangement and what occurred. A critical but largely unexamined issue is whether non-lethal responses were available or considered before the shooting. In many domestic exchange disputes, de-escalation method, retreat, or intermediate force options exist. Law enforcement has not confirmed whether the shooter attempted any non-lethal action, issued a clear warning, or had access to alternatives. Without that information, it is impossible to independently determine whether lethal force was necessary. Throughout the investigation, the family repeatedly stated they did not receive detailed explanations of the evidence, timeline, or forensic findings. Their requests for clarification were acknowledged, but not answered with documentation. Law enforcement provided final conclusions, but did not release supporting details that could allow the family to understand the investigative process. Without transparency, the family's questions remain unresolved. Key forensic elements, entry wounds, bullet trajectory, distance between parties, physical positioning, and environmental traces, were never publicly released. Such information is critical for reconstructing events with precision. Without it, third-party review or community oversight cannot take place. The absence of these findings leaves a gap that prevents a full understanding of whether the official narrative matches the physical evidence. After a relatively short review, the case was closed with no charges or grand jury presentation. Authorities cited self-defense laws, but did not explain why a jury review, commonly used in cases with disputed counts, was not considered. The lack of a grand jury removes an additional layer of evaluation that might have assessed the inconsistencies and unanswered questions. The decision not to pursue further review has contributed significantly to public skepticism. Following the incident, custody of the infant became a major point of concern. Without Tyeasha, the child's living arrangement shifted entirely to the paternal side. No public documentation explains how custody was formalized, whether emergency hearings occurred, or what conditions were set by the court. The family reports limited involvement in these decisions. Tyeasha's relatives faced difficulties in obtaining information, records, and access to the child. Their attempts to participate in custody or visitation discussions were met with procedural obstacles. These complications reflect a broader challenge families often face when a parent dies unexpectedly during a dispute exchange. Although the child was too young to understand the circumstances, long-term psychological implications are unavoidable. Growing up without a primary parent, especially under unresolved circumstances, creates future identity and emotional questions. The impact cannot be measured immediately, but will likely affect the child throughout various developmental stages. Months after the case closed, the family continued seeking answers, requesting a deeper investigation and greater transparency. Their advocacy includes petitions, public awareness efforts, and calls for a reevaluation of the evidence. The persistence highlights the lack of closure resulting from unanswered questions. Local residents expressed concern about the broader dangers associated with custody exchanges. Many noted that disputes during exchanges remain a significant risk factor for violence. The case underscored the vulnerability of young parents navigating legal and interpersonal conflict. Initial reports attracted coverage, but attention diminished shortly afterward. As media focus shifted, the family was left without the public visibility needed to keep pressure on officials. The decline in coverage contributed to a sense of isolation and lack of accountability. Nationwide, custody exchanges remain a frequent source of violent encounters. The absence of standardized safety procedures leaves parents negotiating high-risk interactions without structural protection. Tyeasha's case reflects the dangers inherent in such unregulated situations. Many states lack mandatory safe exchange zones, surveillance-monitored sites, or third-party supervisors. Without these safeguards, parents must conduct exchanges in unpredictable environments. This case demonstrates the consequences of relying on private homes rather than controlled public spaces. Custody arrangements often create disparities based on location, financial resources, or household dynamics. In this case, the imbalance between households appears to have influenced both the events and the aftermath, including access to information and legal decision-making. Variations in state self-defense laws complicate determinations of fault in domestic confrontations. In some jurisdictions, lethal force can be justified even when multiple interpretations of a situation exist. These legal structures can limit accountability in cases where evidence is incomplete or inconsistent. Smaller counties often release minimal information when clearing self-defense cases. This lack of transparency limits community trust and prevents independent evaluation. Similar patterns appear in this case, where crucial evidence was not disclosed. Young parents, particularly mothers, frequently navigate custody systems without adequate support, legal representation, or protection. Situations escalate quickly when underlying tensions remain unresolved. This case demonstrates how these pressures can contribute to high-risk encounters. Although not publicly emphasized, many cases involving young black women in custody disputes involve layers of socioeconomic inequality, strained legal access, and limited institutional support. These factors shape interactions before, during, and after critical incidents. When prior tension exists between households, child protection systems often fail to intervene until after a crisis occurs. The absence of structured monitoring, despite ongoing disputes, create a scenario where risk remained unaddressed until it's too late. The family may pursue civil action against the shooter or involved parties. Civil cases operate under different standards of proof, allowing unresolved inconsistencies to be examined more closely. Such a case could compel disclosure of evidence previously withheld. The case could be reopened if new evidence emerges, if undisclosed surveillance footage appears, or if witness statements change. Significant public pressure, legislative involvement, or independent review could also prompt reevaluation. Any additional footage, forensic clarification, or statements contradicting the original narrative could reshape the case. New information may challenge the self-defense ruling. The family's goals include access to records, transparency, explanation of investigative decisions, and acknowledgement of unresolved evidence. They also seek legal clarity and corrective action where appropriate. Public petitions could request independent investigation or policy changes. Community involvement amplifies pressure on officials and increases visibility for unresolved cases. Potential reforms include mandatory safe exchange zones, continuous surveillance during custody transfers, third-party moderators for high-risk exchanges, clear reporting requirements during domestic dispute investigations. Such policies could reduce future incidents. Tyeasha Starks lost her life during a custody exchange marked by unresolved tension, incomplete evidence, and an investigation that left core questions unanswered. The identity of the shooter remains undisclosed. Forensic details have not been released. Contradictions in witness accounts persist without clarification. Her family continues to seek answers, while raising concerns about the lack of transparency. The impact extends beyond the incident itself. Her child faces a future shaped by absence and uncertainty. Families in similar situations remain vulnerable to the dangers inherent in unregulated domestic exchanges. The case serves as a reminder that accountability depends on transparency, that investigations require thoroughness, and that policy reforms are necessary to prevent similar tragedies. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.